God does not will our suffering. I want to tell you a little story about something that happened to me. When I was 27 and then later when I was 33, I had 2 different strokes. The 2 strokes together had completely occluded or blocked my right middle cerebral artery, which is one of the main arteries that feeds large parts of the brain, your parietal lobe, other things. And when they did scans of me, it almost looks like a tree on a scan. It looks like there's, a trunk with lots of healthy branches. And on the other side, the tree wasn't there. And it took a long time actually for them to figure out how I wasn't more disabled. And one of the people who consulted in that process was a neurosurgeon and I walked into the room. First of all, as I get there, I'm sitting in the waiting room and there's a gentleman next to me whose right side of his face is drooping. He's in a wheelchair. He's unable to move. Basically, the entire right side of his body is paralyzed. And so I go to see this neurosurgeon and I walk in and he looks at me. He looks over at the records and the scan and he looks at me again. And he said, "You're Christian Nielsen, date of birth, blah, blah, blah. I won't reveal here." And I said, "Yeah." And he looked at the scans and he said, "I think I have the wrong scans up. And I think I have the scans for the patient after you." But then he went and looked. He's like, "No, your name is on these." And I said, "Yes, my name is on this. This is me. I am Christian Nielsen." And he looked at it and looked at it again. And he said, "I can't figure out why you can walk in here on your own and why you can do a lot of the things that you can do, because looking at this scan, you should be quite disabled." And he said, "The gentleman out in the waiting room that you were sitting next to, his scans look better than yours." So we did some more workups and we figured out I had something that they termed generous collateral arteries. Collateral arteries happen in the brain. They're arteries that are not there in the physiology and the anatomy of most people. But I was somehow fortunate enough to have these. And so while I was dealing with some significant changes from the stroke, some changes in feeling on my left side, some parts of my executive function weren't quite working very well. And I felt like things were kind of different and it was not fun, let me tell you. But it could have been a lot worse. So I go back in and we're talking to the neurosurgeon and he's like, "But you never just fully stroked out on that side to where everything got paralyzed and didn't come back." And I'm like, "Well, obviously I'm here." But I said, "No, And without thinking about it, I said, thank God. And he turned to me and said, that's right. You thank God every single day, because I don't know how you're standing here. I don't know how you are here. And not more disabled, or not even possibly having died. And I thought about that a little bit, and I realized, well, this person may be an excellent neurosurgeon. He's a lousy theologian. So if I have to thank God that I was not more disabled, was the person in the waiting room I was sitting next to that had the same diagnoses, only on the other side of his brain, which of course took his speech too, does that mean that he somehow wasn't worthy and I was? That really stuck with me for a long time. And at that time, I was kind of early in my hospice career working with people. And I can't tell you how many times people would say the heartbreaking things like, what did I do to deserve this? Or I must have done something wrong. Or even saying, it was that thing that I did when I was, 19. That's why this is happening to me, right? Or it's because I was a bad parent or a bad son or a bad daughter. Something I did must have made me deserve this. And that's not helped by people who often, and I've probably said it earlier in my life too, who sometimes dealing with our own discomfort and our own wanting the world to make sense, that we say things like, everything happens for a reason. It's all part of God's plan. God never gives us any more than we can handle. All of that. But when we start to think about that, does God really give somebody a stroke or cancer? Makes a 2-year-old born with major deformities who isn't expected to live? God wills that? And the thing about the neurosurgeon is not only was he making me think about that other patient, but so I'm supposed to think of the fact that I am now mildly disabled, that there are some issues that are going to take me a long time to get over, and I don't feel like I will ever be the same person, and I never was, and that's okay, because we all grow, and life has this way of happening to us, and we adapt along the way. And I believe that God is with us on the way. But we have a lot of times, there are a lot of folks that attribute a lot of things to choices that are made by God or actions that are God. And sometimes we bypass people's real pain, because my situation is, God wanted me to go through this though? Really? No. I don't believe that for a second. I think about the Gospel of John when Jesus is walking with the disciples and comes across a man who's born blind. And his disciples ask him, Rabbi, who sinned that this man was born blind? Was it him or was it his parents? And Jesus said, neither this man sinned, nor his parents sinned. He was born so that God's work might be revealed in him. Now, I know some people would say that means the blind man was born blind so that Jesus could come along and do this miracle. But I don't think that's, when you think about the things that Jesus taught, I don't think that's what Jesus was saying. I really, really don't. I think that Jesus was saying, when we see suffering, we have an opportunity and an obligation and a responsibility to heal them. And yes, that includes making sure that people don't get thrown off their health care. To talk about some of the more modern, to talk about what's going on these days. So God's work can be revealed through our action. Just as I said last week when we were talking about the Edmund Fitzgerald and the wreck, and that God was not absent, but God was there. And the psalmist, and this comes up in other places too, says that God does not deal with us according to our sins, which, remembering, our sins mean when we miss the mark. That's all it means. But God does not deal with us according to our sins, nor repay us according to our iniquities. I didn't deserve to have a stroke. The man in the lobby, in the waiting room, did not deserve what happened to him. Going back to last week, the crew of the Edmund Fitzgerald, they did not deserve what happened to them. Suffering is a part of life. The Buddha knew this well in saying that all of life is suffering. The Buddha also said the way that we relieve our own suffering is to relieve the suffering of others. Sounds pretty Christ-like to me, if you're also a Christian. Our job is to ease the pain and hardships of others, to be there when people are suffering. God is not the one who does this. Sometimes things happen, or as Forrest Gump would say, shit happens. Sometimes it just happens. And the next time we think about saying something comforting to someone, think about what Rabbi Harold Kushner said in one of his books, that he realized eventually that when he saw patients as a chaplain, patients who were dying and their loved ones, they didn't need theology from him. What they needed was a hug. So when you are with people with suffering, don't offer trite platitudes. I know that sometimes we do this even just to comfort ourselves because we so want the world to make sense, but it doesn't. So think about that. Be a presence for those who are going through suffering. Walk beside them. Because whatever you believe the divine is, that is our divine calling. But we don't leave people alone, and we walk with them through their suffering, and God never means us to hurt. Walk in beauty, my friends. Peace be with you. We'll see you next time. I don't know if you can hear the squirrels running around behind me, but they make for an interesting accompaniment in all of the fallen leaves. Peace.